we're on to the October books finally, of which I read 11, I believe. I also did DNF too, so let's get straight onto those DNFs. Honestly, I feel like both of these are probably soft DNFs. I have been mostly, like, throughout this whole month of October, I was either reading stuff for Goodreads, some horror stuff, or stuff for Yalk, and both of these books that I soft DNF were Yalk books. They were ones that I wanted to try, but I just wasn't really gelling with them at the moment in time, so I may go back to them, but I'm not sure at the moment. The first book was 16 Souls by Rose Talbot. This is a YA horror. I really didn't get that far into this one, to be honest. I started it and I just really was not feeling it. It's basically about this teenage boy who can see ghosts. He's also disabled, and this new guy comes to town who he thinks initially is a ghost, and it turns out he is also like another guy who can see ghosts. He's like a medium or something, and I assume there is some sort of mystery that they both get involved in, which gets them closer to one another. But I just really wasn't feeling it. I wasn't in the mood for this one. The writing felt a little bit messy to me. I just wasn't gelling with it. So I ended up DNFing that fairly early in, to be honest. But I may pick it up again at some point in the future and give it another try. I know the author has actually just released a graphic novel, which is Sapphic, I believe, also supernatural, and I am kind of intrigued by that, so I may try that. The other book I DNF'd, I actually did get a decent way through. I got like 100 or something pages through, and it's Girl Goddess Queen by B. Fitzgerald. I don't have a physical copy of that because it was a library book, and I was quite liking it, but it's so long, and I hit a point in the story, and I just didn't really know where it was going, to be honest, and it felt like there was just a lot to go, and I just had so many other books I wanted to try and get to. I had a feeling it was going to take me a while to get through it. So it is a soft DNF. I probably will pick it up again at some point because I was liking it. And I am kind of intrigued by B. Fitzgerald's other book that also came out. I think it's called The End of Us All, because that is actually a Sapphic Greek retelling. Both of these books are Greek retellings. Girl Goddess Queen is actually a Persephone and Hades retelling, which we've seen it done so many times. I think that was the main reason, is that we got to a certain point and I kind of understood who Persephone and Hades were as characters, and I didn't really know where else it was going to go, to be honest, at that point. So although I still do want to go back to it, my intrigue had just gone at that point, so I decided just to put it aside for now, and I'll probably go back to it in the future. So those were my two DNFs, not bad DNFs by any means, and yeah, maybe books I will actually come back to, I'm hoping. So on to the books I actually did read. I did only get one 5-star this month, and in fact I started the month with a 5-star. I read this by audiobook actually, and I did this really quick, and it was a book that I actually didn't think I was gonna like that much, and I ended up really loving it, obviously, because I gave it a 5-star. And I read 2 books by this author, and this was books that I hadn't intended to read, but it just happened to be available by audiobook on like my library borrow box app. So I thought, oh sure, I'm traveling, I'll just put it on in the background. And I ended up really liking it. And that is Sisters by Daisy Johnson. This is a very like short, as you can see, novella kind of thing. She usually writes short story kind of stuff, and her thing is like horror. Usually. This is not her debut. I read her debut later on and sadly didn't like it as much, but I really enjoyed this one. This is basically about these 2 sisters who are not twins, but they kind of act like they're twins basically. They kind of like move away from their original home after some sort of incident that happens with their mother, and it gets weird is all I'll say. It really does encapsulate like the teenage experience, but also in this like really messed up psychological way, and I just really enjoy where this went. It's very psychological, very introspective. It actually reminded me a little bit of this book I read earlier this year called Idle Burning, not at all for the story, but just for how weird things going on inside someone's head and you're not really sure what's real or not, and someone kind of trapping themselves inside a life that no one else can understand. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought the twist was really good. I thought the writing was gorgeous. I was just kind of obsessed with this from the very first moment. The book actually skips between one of the sisters. It's July and September are the two sisters. I think we follow, it's July that we follow, who is, I think, the younger sister. And then we also see some viewpoints from the mother's point of view, which kind of explains a few things. But yeah, I also love this thing that it does this almost like this poetry thing right at the beginning, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense until you get near the end, and it makes a lot more sense then, and it kind of repeats it. And I love when you get this like cyclical sort of dialogue going on. But yeah, I just really loved this book. I had actually read this because I was going to an event for Manchester Literature Festival, which was going to be Daisy Johnson and Andrew Michael Hurley. I'd read one of Andrew Michael Hurley's books before, Starvacre, and really liked it, so I was going mainly for him. And then I thought I'd pick up some Daisy Johnson books just to try them out, and I ended up actually liking her books more than I liked Andrew Michael Hurley's, which was kind of hilarious. But yeah, she just writes this kind of, I guess it's almost folk horror, I want to say. Both of them write folk horror, which is why they were both doing the event, and unfortunately on the day she couldn't actually make the event because there was a family emergency, so it's a little good, to be honest, because I would have loved to have heard her speak about these books, because yeah, I ended up absolutely adoring this book, and this was my favorite book of October. So yeah, it's a hard one to describe, and again, I feel like it's one that, like Idle Burning, will not work for many people, but it just hit that nice little weird sweet spot that I love with psychological horror. I read another book in between, but I may as well talk about it whilst I'm talking about Daisy Johnson. But I did actually read her debut book as well, which is a short story collection called Fen. Also kind of horror themed. They're all like short stories, but they all kind of have like the same setting, and occasionally we do see characters sort of appear in one story, which I thought was quite cool. But this one didn't quite work for me, unfortunately. I could kind of see that there was like, I could see the attempt of what Daisy was trying to do in these stories, and some of them worked, and then some of them just kind of didn't really work for me, and I think they lost their way a little bit. So I could definitely see where she was going with it, and I think she just needed like a little bit longer on some of these stories maybe. Her debut, I rated a 3-star overall, which to be honest is kind of standard for short story collections, I feel, for me, because there's always some that you like and then there's some that you don't like. I think probably ironically one of the strongest stories in that collection was like the very first story, which I think was about a girl who transformed into something like an eel. Yeah, she transformed into an eel, and I remember that being, it reminded me so much because I read Salt Slow recently as well, which is also a short story horror collection, similar kind of vibes to be honest to Fen, and in that first short story it also had about a girl who turned into something that it was a praying mantis. So that was a thing in that they both kind of share, which I thought was really funny. Yeah, and I liked that story, and I'm trying to remember the other stories, but none of them really stick with me that much, unfortunately. And yeah, it's this magical realism, literary fiction, touches on horror, but it's more just weird. Okay, I have actually found my notes where I did it, because I was actually away at the time when I read this, I think, so I was traveling, so I didn't really have any like way to write stuff down, so I just wrote stuff in like my messenger to myself. And yeah, looking at this, of the stories, I rated 2 of them 4 stars, and then the rest are a mix of 3 and 2 stars, unfortunately. Starver was the one where the girl turns into an eel. That one I rated 4 stars, and the other one I rated 4 stars was a story called A Bruise, the Shape and Size of a Door Handle. I don't remember what it's about now, unfortunately. And then the other stories I rated Blood Rites 3 stars, The Superstition of the Albatross was 3 stars, Lighthouse Keeper was 3 stars, and then the rest were all 2 stars, unfortunately. Really don't even remember a whole lot about them, which is a shame. I did really enjoy Sisters, and I think I liked what Fen was trying to do, but it just didn't quite work for me. But yeah, overall that was a 3-star, and probably not one I'll revisit. Then I read one of my Goodreads books. This month I was doing horror versus debut novel. I know the video is not out yet. I am really behind on them. I actually still haven't quite finished them, even though we're in November, because I got kind of sidetracked by reading Yelp stuff, to be honest. So that video will not be coming out until probably towards the end of November, I imagine, at this point. So I will not really say very much about those books, just because I will be having a full review for them. Because the winner of the horror category was, of course, Stephen King by Holly. I wasn't crazy on this, unfortunately. It's probably one of the least favorite Stephen King books I've read. A low 3, mid 3 or so. Unfortunately for me, just didn't really work. I also read Shark Heart Story for debut novel by Emily Haberk. It was in the fiction category, but it's actually kind of magical realism, and it is about this world where everything is normal except for the fact that you can occasionally mutate into animals. And in our story, it's like a newly married couple, I believe, and the husband starts turning into a great white shark. So yeah, that was a time. I actually quite liked it. It didn't quite go as good as I wanted it to be, but overall it was really solid and I really enjoyed it. The other 2 debut books are the ones that I have yet to read, but I did read the other 2 horror books. So I read Rouge by Mona Awad. It was not as good as I wanted it to be, unfortunately, as well. Had some great ideas, had some great imagery, but I loved Bunny by Mona Awad, so I had really high expectations, and this was just a 3.5. I would reread this one, I think, because I do think it had some really good ideas and the imagery was so cool. I loved the imagery, but I just didn't connect with it or get as into the horror as I think I could have. And then the other horror I read was House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. This is one that I felt mixed going into because I love T. Kingfisher and I love what I have read of T. Kingfisher's horror previously, which is just the twisted ones, but I wasn't sure if I was going to like this one. I realized I've been talking about it and I do actually have the books. So yeah, that was Rouge, sorry, I could have mentioned that. And then A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. This is a fairly short book. I actually ended up listening to a lot of it via audiobook because the audiobook was quite good for this one. I did quite like this one. I'd heard not great things about it, but I actually did really like it. So yeah, I gave this one a low 4, I'd say. It didn't have the horror I wanted it to have. In fact, none of the books had the horror I wanted them to have. But I do love T. Kingfisher, and this is definitely one that I did really like as well. I don't think I've read a T. Kingfisher book I haven't liked at this point in time. So yeah, another horror of hers that I have now read and did enjoy. Just wasn't quite as terrifying as I thought it could have been, but I really enjoyed the characters, which I usually always do with T. Kingfisher, to be honest. On to the other books that I read. Actually one of the Booker Prize shortlist. I was kind of considering reading all of them, and then it was really hard to get hold of them from the library. I didn't really want to buy them because I'm iffy with literary fiction. I don't know if they're gonna work for me or not a lot of the time. I ended up getting 2 out from the library. I got James by Percival Everett and Orbital by Samantha Harvey, and I ended up not bothering with James in the end because it's based off Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, a specific character in that who is a black slave who is kind of used a lot, I guess, by the kids, and it's supposed to be his story about telling how it really was. And I started listening to Huckleberry Finn to try and remind myself of the story of Huck Finn. I think I read Tom Sawyer, but I never read Huck Finn, but I had seen a movie for it. So I started to listen to Huckleberry Finn, narrated by Elijah Wood, actually, who was very good. And I just realized it wasn't really a book I was interested in. It's just boys being boys. I realized I didn't really want to read it, and that kind of put me off reading James as well at the moment. So I may go back to that in the future, but I decided not to do that one. But I did read Orbital by Samantha Harvey, which I guess we can call it a sci-fi, but there isn't any fantasy elements to it like how you do in sci-fi. It is a literary fiction really, but it is actually set in space. So it's kind of sci-fi, but not really. It's also really short, which was another reason why I was I will read this one, because it was only 100 pages or something, really short book. And I actually really liked this one. I thought the writing was really beautiful. Not a lot really happens in this book. It is essentially just a day in the life of this group of astronauts that are circuiting the Earth. They're not on a moon mission or anything, though there is a moon mission happening during the course of the book. But yeah, basically it's just them circuiting the Earth. And yeah, we just kind of go in their minds and see what they're feeling and their thoughts about the place down below and how they're feeling about being up there. In terms of story, there's not really any story, but I actually really did enjoy it. So yeah, I gave that one a 4-star. Probably wouldn't pick it up again to read because it feels like it's the kind of thing that you read it and it's an experience and then it's over. I don't think it would really work as well in a reread, but I did think it was beautifully written, and I'm glad I did choose to pick that one up. Then I read 2 books by Andrew Michael Hurley. As I said, I was going to the event with him. I'd already read Starvaker, which I remember really, really liking, and then I checked my Goodreads for what I thought about it, and I only gave it a 3 star. So I was like, I guess I didn't like it as much as I thought, but it really, really stuck with me. So I think I may need to reread that at some point, because in my head, I feel like it was a 4 star. But apparently I rated it a 3 star. So I then went and I read 2 more books by Andrew Michael Hurley. These really like match well together, don't they? So I already had The Loney and had it for quite a while. But when I was up in Scotland for Cymera, not in Scotland, sorry. When I was in Hale Y, I picked up Devil's Day as well. And I did manage to read both of these before the event. I'm kind of sad to say it, but I think for me, Andrew Michael Hurley is just a 3 star author for me. I really, really wanted to love these. I think his ideas are great. I love the whole folk horror kind of thing, but I just didn't really find myself really getting super invested in these or getting scared, unfortunately. I still thought they were really interesting, and I thought they were great character studies. Both of these books, the supernatural elements are fairly limited in them, so it's light horror, I would say. It's more about the horror of the lives these people are living rather than the actual supernatural horrors that are also assailing them, which there are, but unfortunately it just didn't quite work for me. Starvaker, I think, was definitely the strongest in terms of the 3 stories. I think I'm gonna pass on Devil's Day, but I am going to keep The Loney because it's one that I wasn't sure I really liked when I was reading it, and then like a week or 2 later, and I kept thinking about it, so I feel like it is one that I do want to come back to. So I have rated this one slightly higher. I gave this one low to mid 3, I think, and this one is about these 2 brothers who, when they were younger, one was mute and the other one looked after him, and stuff happened at this place called The Loney. It's this very like religious community that they live in, and they basically go to this place as part of like a pilgrimage kind of thing with the new priest and like all the family and like all the members of the congregation to kind of perform this ritual to heal the mute boy. And that's very creepy with how it goes into it. It gets very culty, and also really weird things are happening. Honestly, the scare factor of the family was really good in this one, and I think it's that which has stuck with me. So we're kind of like following in the future the one who wasn't mute grown up, and him thinking about what happened back then, and it's this like rising tension basically as it leads up to this ritual, because you know something is going to happen but you don't know what, and you get the feeling it's going to be something really messed up. So yeah, this one I did quite like in the end. I just wasn't sure whilst I was reading it because it did feel so mixed to me, but it has really stuck with me. Still feeling mixed about it, but again, it's less a horror and more a character study with terrible people, I guess. And then Devil's Day. Wait, I know why I didn't like this now. I was like, why do I not like this? Because this is a cool idea. This is basically about this guy who goes back to his like old hometown village basically for like the first time in years with his new wife who was pregnant, and it gets really weird. And I think the thing that I ended up not liking about this was the main character. Unfortunately, he is incredibly unlikable in terms of how he tries to take the agency away from his wife, and I found that really troubling. And I think the story itself is good. It's just that I personally found it really uncomfortable to read from this character's point of view. He is basic as he goes back to this old home place. Like, he grows obsessed with the idea of living his life there, of raising his new child there, and his wife does not want to do this. This is not her kind of place. And he makes it kind of obvious that he wants this to happen, and it's going to happen. So whilst there are creepy things happening around the place as well, we're leading up to this plaything called Devil's Day, which is kind of like Halloween. And there's this whole like creepy folk ritual basically to do with Devil's Day in that. And it's to kind of ward away the devil, I guess, who was going to do bad things and ruin the village. I was honestly I felt really uncomfortable about everything that was going on with the main character. So I think that is the issue I had with it, and that is what made it a not enjoyable experience for me, because I did like the story thinking back on it. I just cannot get past how the main character was. So yeah, that one, unfortunately, I'm probably going to pass on because I found it very uncomfortable. I didn't end up picking up Andrew Michael Hurley's latest book, which is a kind of a short story collection, actually, set over like a really long time period as well. It did sound interesting, but because I'd kind of had mixed experiences and I realized I've basically rated all 3 of his books 3 stars, I was like, I don't know if I want to buy a new book by him. So yeah, I am going to leave it there with him for now. I may try him again in the future, and I do want to watch the Starbaker film actually, because I think it looks really good, and I'd like to reread Starbaker at some point to see if my feelings have changed about it over time. But yeah, this is very kind of like slow, quiet kind of folk horror is what he writes, and it is mostly character based, and I think if that doesn't really work for you, then the horror isn't really going to click. So I read 3 more books then. One of them I hadn't actually finished at the end of October, but I may just talk about it now because I have finished it now. I finished it maybe a day or 2 in November, and I feel like I want to talk about it whilst it's still fresh in my mind. So because it was Halloween season, I basically did pick all of the books for Yalk that were all horror to read. So the first one I picked up was Young Gothic by M.A. Bennett. This is a debut novel, I want to say. Actually, no, I think it's their debut YA. I feel they've mostly written middle grade before this author. And this one is another book that I honestly feel kind of mixed about. Like, love the cover, gotta say. Like, the cover is definitely one of the reasons that I picked this one up, and that it's very kind of inspired by classic horror, Gothic horror. Frankenstein, Dracula, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, The Invisible Man, that kind of thing. It's all very heavily inspired by that. And I think the premise for this is really good, and there's just something about the execution that I don't know if it quite worked for me. So basically in this book, we're following these 3 characters who are all teenagers, and we actually hear from each of the characters throughout the book. We kind of alternate between them, and they are all kind of got some kind of relation to horror in some way in their life. Like, one of them is like a booktuber who had like a horrific near-death experience, and now she like does like Gothic and horror book kind of reviews. One is a film YouTuber who talks about horror. Another is a rapper who got really popular, and the final person is an actor who has kind of done these Gothic readings online and got really popular about it. So they're all like heavily involved in pop culture and social media in that kind of thing, but they've all got this like horror link between them, although in a very different way. And they're all very different characters as well. So basically all 4 of them get invited to the original Villa Diodati, which is where like Byron, Mary Shelley, Polidori, Peter Shelley, Percy Shelley, sorry, originally like all came together and like wrote their big books. So like Frankenstein was invented there, that kind of thing. So they all get invited to go there basically, which I think is in Switzerland. And the idea is that they're supposed to like, they're gathering these creatives together to like create new Gothic stories or something, but it gets more twisted and it becomes kind of obvious later on that something is not right there, and they may have been brought there for an entirely different reason, and things get kind of supernatural and weird. And we start off straight away knowing that someone is going to die, and we assume one of the people is probably going to be the perpetrator of this, but we don't know who. So yeah, it is a murder mystery, a bit of a slow burn murder mystery, but it does come together really well towards the end. And I think this is like, it was a really interesting book, and I had a really good time with it. I think the issue I had with it wasn't the characters themselves. They are intentionally pretentious because of who they are, and that kind of works, but I also found it a little hard sometimes to hear from certain points of view, because I found them to be a little frustrating at times. Like my favorite character, Ren, I actually really struggled to read his parts of the book because he speaks in such like it's a real like exaggerated teen speak kind of way, and it was a little embarrassing to read his bits. I thought they were all really interesting. I had an idea of where it was going, and it did kind of throw me. It really does a good job of like the is this real, is this not real kind of thing. And the author is coming out with a sequel, which I believe is going to be set in Transylvania, going to like Dracula's castle kind of thing. So I'm probably going to carry this on because I wasn't quite satisfied with where the characters ended up at the very end, and I would like to see what happens going forward with these characters. But yeah, I liked it, but like with caveats. There was something that just kind of missed out on me, I think. But I gave this a low 4 overall. I did have a good time with it. I felt it was maybe a bit too long. It's like almost 500 pages. For a YA, that's quite long, and for a horror, that's quite long. So it maybe could have been done with a little bit of trimming, but I did think the character dynamics were really interesting, and it was just some things, I think, with the characters that bothered me. There was some stuff with like, because there's only one girl, even though Ren kind of comes across as non-binary. And there was some stuff with Eve that I think is very uncomfortable, and I would check trigger warnings going into this because of some specific things that happen with the characters. There is homophobia, there is talk around abortion, grooming. So I think that was another thing that kind of put me off, is that I didn't like how icky some of Eve's storyline was, not in terms of that she had an operation. I thought it was a bit exploitative, some of her backstory, and I didn't like how it just felt weird to me because like she kept like stripping a lot, and I just didn't quite understand what was happening with that. It felt a bit male gazy, and I felt very uncomfortable about that. Maybe I just didn't get it, I don't know, but that bit kind of set uneasily with me, and I think that's why I ended up giving it a lower rating, because there were just some things that I was like, didn't need to do that. So the other Yelp book I read, there was both books, sorry, both were horror books, and this was one that I picked up and I honestly didn't think I was gonna like it, and I had the best time with this book. This is Apocalypse Cow by O.R. Sorrell, and this absolutely looks ridiculous. It is kind of like a comedy horror kind of thing, but it does go hard with the horror. I will say, I was kind of impressed. And basically this is about this girl called Mel, who is madly in love with her best friend, who is oblivious and straight. So this is like, it's a queer horror as well, which I love. That's all that seems to be in her life until an apocalypse happens. The animals start mutating in the world around them and start acting all murdery and having these crazy superpowers. Like we had, what was it, like foxes shot lightning bolts, ducks heated up pools of water to boiling capacity. There was a lot of crazy stuff going on with the animals, which I really enjoyed. It was very like B horror in that, and like it was kind of ridiculous, but also like when you saw the aftermath of what happened, it was also terrifying. So anyway, this happens, and Mel ends up being stuck at this mansion with like the two people she hates the most in the world, like this girl that she used to be friends with but now like horrifically bullies her, and her best friend's boyfriend, who she just hates anyway because he's like this posh asshole. So she ends up being stuck with them in a mansion during the apocalypse, and they're just trying to survive, and they obviously end up sort of getting to know each other more and understanding each other more, and this was just a really good time. Like I read this in a day, I think. It was like hard for me to put down, and like it is a very like quick read as well. Like it's quite big text and it isn't massively long. It's maybe, it was 300 pages, so it is long-ish, but it was a very quick read. Honestly, this is the kind of book that I'm like, this would get you out of a reading slump. So yeah, don't be put off by how ridiculous it looks. I had the best time with this book. I rated it a mid-4. So it wasn't quite a 5-star because it was just, it was obviously kind of ridiculous and tongue-in-cheek, but it was supposed to be like that campy kind of silly horror. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed this. I had such a good time, and this was an unexpected favorite, which is always nice. It's nice when you pick something up kind of randomly and you don't really expect much from it and it kind of blows you away. So yeah, that was a really good unexpected surprise for me. So the last book I'll talk about then is the book that I technically finished in November, but we may as well talk about it now. And I finally got to the Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. This was picked out for me by my friend Laura when she picked my TBR, and I've been meaning to get to it since then, and I've just not had time. But Yauka's Sued, and I really did want to get to it because it was also one that I really did think I was going to love, and I'm so happy to say that I did really love this. I guess this is a spoiler for next month because this was a 5-star for me. So you know I've gotten at least one 5-star in November, which is great. This is like the Evernight edition, sorry. You may be more familiar with the American, not the American, just the standard cover. This is the Evernight horror edition, and I think it's like one of the only YAs that they've done, to be honest. Unless their newest one, Academy of Liars, is YA. But yeah, this is YA, but I would say it's very mature YA, bordering on adult. Like, these characters could so easily have been adults. They were just in that like cusp of late teenage years, it feels like, and of the 3 of them, 2 of them are fairly mature, and the other character is kind of like the more naive one, but it does work in terms of the plot. So basically, this is about these 3 women who I jokingly did call Betty, Veronica, and Cheryl from Riverdale back when I first saw this book. Our character here, Zara, her sister was brutally murdered like a year or so ago, so she's trying to find the killer. Jude here, who is in the middle, basically has like cursed herself kind of wrong, and she's decaying, I guess is the best thing I can say. So she's looking for like someone to uncurse her. And then Emma is kind of like that she was like a feral child basically, because all her family was destroyed and she was like living in the woods for a few years until her cousin found her. But she is a curse writer, sorry, she's a curse writer, and she is someone who can basically craft spells onto people, like bonding them with demons, which is what she tried to do and royally messed up. So the 3 of them end up meeting because of these murders that are happening. Basically, all of these people who are being murdered are women who had previously come to Emma for curse writers, and Emma like usually does these curses for women for free to like protect them from people, usually in domestic violence. So basically all these women are turning up dead, and the link is that it's all to do with Emma's magic. And yeah, they're basically just playing Scooby-Doo and investigating together what happened, who it could be, and trying to stop the killer before they get more people, including them, really. And yeah, this was so easy to read. I really enjoyed the writing. The characters were honestly great. Like, Jude and Emma easily were such great characters. Zara I probably liked the least, but she did serve a purpose in the plot, which I liked, because she was the more naive one who didn't necessarily know what was going on. She's kind of the one that like maybe does the more stupid actions, but it did work in terms of the plot. Like, usually when you have like a character who's more naive and they kind of like do things that is like not good and messing things up, you kind of want to yell at them. But I kind of got where she was coming from, and it actually worked out really interesting in terms of the overall plot because of what she did. So yeah, I will also say I understand why this is an Evernight horror book. The body horror in this is so good. Like, it's really grotesque. If you are not a fan of like body horror, then you will not like this. But to me, this was just such a good witchy, gross, dark kind of read. This is everything I really wanted from a dark, witchy book. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed the characters. I kind of want there to be like another book in the series, but it's probably just going to be a standalone. Yeah, I had the best time with this. I did also listen to some of this via audiobook, and then I switched to physical book towards the end. Yeah, I thought the narrator was pretty good for this as well. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. I just thought it was really good. It was a total vibe. It was everything I wanted it to be, which I feel like doesn't happen very much in terms of books that I read. So yeah, I did get a very good, successful horror book, which I'm very happy about. So yeah, that is all the books finally I've talked about. God knows how long this video is. If you've managed to stay this long, thank you. Honestly, thank you so much. I know I do these like really long videos, and I know it's not exactly bite-sized or easy for people to watch or listen to, but I hope some people do at least find something interesting out of it and get some takeaway from it. So the only thing I have left to do now is to have a look at my bingo board, and I'm hoping, because it's been 2 months rather than 1 month since I last looked at it, I'm gonna have made some significant progress, and with any luck I will have actually gotten some bingos. So I'm going to move over so I have time to put up what was August's one. I definitely am hoping I can cross some of these off, but we'll see, because I'm looking at them now and I know straight away that I did not finish a manga series. I have not had time to read much manga. However, I am hopefully going to be really chunking some manga in November and December. So with any luck, I will be able to raise that number up. Read 50% of my 2024 purchases. I was on a 39. I'm not doing great with this, unfortunately. In fact, I did the maths the other day. I'm at 40% now. So we've gone a little bit higher, but we're still not at that 50%. I think that may have to be my priority in December, alongside like finishing off the Goodreads Awards challenge, because that will be the last month I'll be doing that. I really do want to try and get to that 50%. I don't know how many books that means I have to read. I need to like math it out and figure it out, but that might be something that I plan for my December TBR, is that I try and prioritize books that I have mostly bought. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. At the moment, it's not looking likely that I'll get to 50%, but 40% is not dreadful. Okay, TBR Veterans. This is one I kind of should be focusing on because I really haven't made a lot of progress in it. I don't think any of them are TBR Veterans. Oh, the Loney, actually, because I've had that one for a while and I just kept not getting to it. That raises that up to 4. Because before I was doing TBR Veterans as like things I was pulling up the jar, but I'm not going to get to them all. So I'm just going to say anything that I've had for like over a year is a TBR Veteran at this point. Although I have had a study in drowning for a while. When did it come out? I'm gonna check that. September. You know what? I'm gonna count it. Because yeah, I feel like felt like it was longer than that, to be honest. But yeah, I'm gonna count it. So that does bring me up to a 5. I'm nowhere near completing this one, but I feel like it might be one I don't get to complete at this point, to be honest. 10 horror or thriller books. I've already smashed this one, but I am still smashing it. I was on a 16. Let me count how many more I've read in the past 2 months. Yeah, I'm on 30 now. Because it was Halloween, I've obviously read a whole bunch of horror books, and I read the thrillers for the Goodreads category and the horror books for the horror category. So yeah, we're at 30 on that one. We are absolutely smashing it. In fact, I practically doubled in the last 2 months. No Aluna Crate prompt cards. I think this again is one that is just not going to get done this year. I don't think I've got time to be using prompt cards because I have such a specific TBR, but I will be using them next year for my specific project that I'll be doing throughout the whole year. So look out for that. 10 sequels or books in a series. Again, this is one that I've already smashed, so we're currently sat at 22. Geez, okay, I really did smash that one. So yeah, we're currently at 22, but I did read another volume of The Summer Hikaru Died and another volume of Apothecary Diaries, so that brings us up to a 24. Did I read any other sequels? Does Think Again count as a sequel? I think it kind of does. So we're gonna say 25. The Housemaid's Secret was a sequel, so 26. So yeah, it's a shame. I'm very close to that middle row being really good if I'd actually done a prompt card. 10 sci-fi books. I was at a 5, and I definitely have read more sci-fi because I feel like a lot of our book club books have been sci-fi recently. So what did I say we were at? A 5. So I read Principle of Moments, which is a 6. Scythe. And I guess I will count Orbital because I don't know what else to call it other than fiction. But I'm just going to call it sci-fi because it's set in space. So we're at an 8, which means we're actually really close to getting those 10 sci-fi books. Just 2 more books to read, and my book club book for the month is also sci-fi. So I would definitely have one for November, and then I need to have one more sci-fi book, and we're golden. BFF Control by TBR. I have now read everything that Laura set for me to read, apart from Heaven Official's Blessing, because I soft DNF'd it. As in, I just wasn't vibing with it at the time, so I am going to go back to it because I love that series. I just didn't feel like it at the time. But yeah, I managed to finish When the Moon Hatched during the last 2 months and the Invocations. So I have now officially read all the books that she wanted me to read. Because the 4th book was From a Buick 8, which I did actually read in the month. 10 rainy day books. We were on a 9 for this. I think we've beaten it. Because A Study in Drowning was a rainy day book. I was weirdly putting it off. I don't know why. And I was just like, I'll get to it, even though I know I'd probably love it and that I loved Ava Reid. So that was definitely a rainy day book, which gets me to a 10. Anything else? When the Moon Hatched could have become a rainy day book, but I read it basically as soon as I bought it, so I'm not going to count it. For the Moments, that was a rainy day book. I'm sorry I didn't like it as much as I was hoping I was going to, but that does bring us to an 11. I think that is it. Definitely, if I hadn't had them for specific projects, I think the Invocations and Rouge would definitely have been rainy day books, but I did end up getting them for specific projects, so I got to them quite fast. So yeah, that is now the new bingo board. I'm really happy that I have completed 3 now squares on this. Technically 4, because I never had like a limit for BFS Control my TBR. I just wanted it to happen, and it happened. But yeah, I just really need to be finishing off that sci-fi, which I think I can do. I don't know if TBR Veterans is going to work at this time. Manga series, I don't know, maybe I'll pick something else that's short up towards the end of the year, just so I can try and smash that, because I am intending to read a lot of Witch Hat Atelier and Villains Destined to Die in November, but the issue is that they're not finished series, and I don't know if I should count ongoing, but I'm up to date as a tick on my bingo board. I'm really not sure. I also did really want to try and finish Higurashi, which I still have like, I don't know, like 15 volumes left to go, so maybe I'll work on that. But yeah, I'm not upset with this bingo board. I'm definitely not going to be able to finish it by the end of the year. Getting that 50% I think is going to be tough. So I'm not going to make this video any longer than it needs to be, so I am going to leave it here. I was debating talking about the Spookopoly films that I ended up watching through October, but this does not need to be any longer, so I might just put that in on the end of my Goodreads video for October, which was the Horror versus Debut, because I was kind of watching them whilst I was doing it. So you might see it pop up in there, and maybe I'll do some mini reviews for them. I did watch like quite a decent amount of movies, but I didn't actually get to all of the props that I rolled, unfortunately, because it was just a really hectic month. So I will not bore you with my movie reviews now, but I hope you found this interesting. All the gold stars if you got to the end of this video. Please give me a pumpkin emoji in the comments if you managed to get this far. As you can tell, it may be November, but I'm still living my best Halloween life. Until next time, stay safe, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!